The most news in the morning. CNN's American Morning. Weekday, 6 a.m. Eastern.
Well, in the last 48 hours, we've agreed to a sequence of actions that I'm going to direct BP to take, starting with flushing out the current blowout preventer, actually looking for a material that might cause us a problem, then actually move to put a new blowout preventer on, and then do the bottom kill. This will ensure that we can withstand any pressures that may be generated. If all that lines up, we should be looking somewhere the week after Labor Day.
So a week after Labor Day, we could be done with that well at least. We still got some oil to clean up, but we could be done.
Hopefully.
But meanwhile, the other procedures have worked. I mean, there is no more oil still. I mean, is that still...
That's correct.
The testing is still showing that there's no oil flowing. I want to ask you, though, about what NOAA Administrator Jane Lubchenco said about a couple of weeks ago, giving a hopeful feeling to a lot of people by saying that a lot of the oil was gone, that nearly 75% of it was in some way either dispersed or cleaned up, skimmed, burned off, and that only about 25% was left. There have been two studies that have come out since then from university researchers, one out of Georgia and one out of Florida, who really dispute those numbers, saying that nearly 80% of the oil is not recovered and still remains a threat. Who's right?
Well, I don't want to presume some of these academic positions, but I will tell you this. Some of the assumptions that are being made by some of these other folks are not the same as the government assumptions. Here's where I come from. First of all, we want to know what the flow rate is. And early on, as you know, there was a lot of talk, 1,000, 5,000 barrels a day, way low. We finally impaneled a government team to take a look at flow rate, and we finally settled on 53,000 barrels a day, plus or minus 10%. If you think that's a valid estimate of flow rate, then you can say, well, how much total was released? It's about 4.9 million barrels. The next question is, what happened to it? There's certain things we know for certain. We produced almost 827,000 barrels that we collected and brought ashore. We know what we skimmed, we know what we burned, we know what was effective using dispersants, and then there are general academic estimates about evaporation and so forth. When you do all of that and you add it up, it leaves 26%. That's not a definitive statement, but it's a way to start to have a conversation about what's happening with the oil, which we need to do for natural resource damage assessments. And you can take a lot of different estimates and run that formula, but that's the one that we're starting with.
Did you understand what a lot of people, and maybe just you, just hearing the numbers, without somebody hearing that breakdown, to tell somebody that only 26% of that oil is still out there, did you understand kind of the public going, what in the world are they talking about? How in the world can that be possible? It just doesn't seem logical to a lot of people.
Well, it could be a semantical argument. What we were saying is, other than 26%, the rest of it can be accounted for some way. That 26% is going to end up on a beach. It's going to have to be dealt with somehow.
The other question, though, when they talk about dispersing the oil, there are some scientists who argue that that doesn't necessarily mean it's gone, that it's broken up into these microscopic droplets that they have then found very far down at the seabed, that they're worried could possibly affect future harvests, the larvae of some of these and some of the delicate, smaller phytoplanktons, other things that are sort of the basis for the food chain. What does the government feel in terms of, or think, the best assessment long term of how much toxicity could remain because of a dispersant oil combo?
Well, first of all, the statement is correct that dispersants don't do away with the oil. What they do is they create smaller particles, allow it to biodegrade quicker, so the earth can assimilate it quicker. We understand there are issues related to dispersants, especially when it's mixed with the oil. EPA just recently completed studies where they mixed the dispersant with the oil from the Macondo well and found no cause for concern or no greater toxicity. So I don't think there is an issue with dispersants. Now, there's a larger issue from a public policy standpoint about how much we want to use in the future, and I think we ought to take a look at that moving forward. But right now, there's no indication that there's an increased toxicity because of the use of dispersants.
You are on a delayed retirement right now, if you will. Who becomes the face of this response when you're done? When will you be done? And we not see you in front of the microphone so much anymore. And a lot of people are able to turn to you, at least with BP out there in the government. A lot of people can look at you at least and they say, okay, I'll trust what he's saying. But who becomes the face and the spokesperson once you hang it up? And when will that be?
Well, it's pretty clear when the recovery is going to be done. We got to kill the oil. Yeah. There can't be any more oil on the water. There's going to be some time since oil showed up on the beaches or in the marshes. We have to have a clear way ahead of how we're going to continue to account for oil when it does show up. I think the two real long poles in the tent are going to be the issuance of Secretary Mavis's report for long-term recovery in the Gulf and the creation of the structure that will implement that and who will lead that. I think when those things are known, my transition date will pretty much be apparent at that point.
So right now you're indefinite. You're still in that delayed indefinite retirement?
Proud to be here.
Are you confident that the Gulf will fully recover from this in terms of the fishing industry, the shrimping industry, and just the way of life that they know it now on the water?
Well, I think that should be the goal. I think there's so many things we don't know. We need to go through what we call a natural resource damage assessment, which is required under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which is paid for by BP. We need to understand the long-term implications of hydrocarbons. In relation to your earlier question, last week I signed an order that tries to consolidate all of the efforts for testing for hydrocarbons in the Gulf and see if we can't bring in the academic institutions in the Gulf under Jan Lipchenko's coordination at NOAA and have not only a near-term but a long-term search for hydrocarbons to make sure we can actually answer all those questions.